Hello and welcome to a new episode of I Can Do. I am Benjamin Lee. Joining with me is another fantastic guest, all the way from Great Britain, John Lumgair. Hopefully, I pronounced your name correctly, John. I'm so thankful that you are here. We had some technical difficulties, but I think we got it figured out. And I really want to share with the world what you're doing, what your team is doing. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good
Yeah,
to be here.
it's great to see you again. And yeah, so let's start from the top again because we were recording a little bit and it just didn't work out originally. Um, John, you're doing a lot of interesting things, and you reached out to me and said, maybe a little bit different guest, but I think you and I, or I know you and I, have a lot in common. Obviously, with our faith, and I think some of the challenges a lot of people are facing with this idea of well-being. And so you're into music, you're into art, animation, family man as well. Walk us through how you ended up in this career of animation. So tell us your story about how you got to this point right now.
So, yeah, like a lot of people in my generation, I watched a lot of TV and watched animation, and I couldn't get enough of it. Any time there were cartoons on TV, I'd be trying to watch them and then watch the credits and be like, how do they make this? What do they do? I'd make these little flick books to try and make my own, which were really quite bad. And I actually got little books on animation. I remember one where you could little things you could make, and yeah, did all of that. Did lots of drawing and at school, and uh, ended up being the only thing I was really good at. And then ended up going to art school, studied animation, and then that was the kind of my route.
Yeah, yeah. Animation is such a big thing. You can just see behind my wall. I'm a big Marvel fan, and I think about like the What If series, and animation is just huge today. I was never really into comics, but different cartoons and things like that. I guess those would fall into animation. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up watching the Smurfs and Alvin and the Chipmunks and X-Men and things like that. So when did you know that you wanted to get into a career with respect to animation?
Well, at the age of 5.
Really?
You know how
Wow.
you ask a child what they want to do when they're older, and they say something, then the next week you see them, you say, "What do you want to do?" And they name something completely different. I
Yeah,
was always
yeah.
wanted to do this.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
was quite
cool.
deluded about what it would be, probably.
I would imagine then that you have to have a lot of patience when it comes to animation. So are you working a lot then with computers with what you're doing and the contracts and things like that you're doing?
Yeah, I sit at my computer far too many hours a day.
Mm,
But I've got a little thing about this big that like I plug in and I can draw straight into it, so it comes up into the computer. So it's a
mm,
little bit more tactile and real than just trying to draw with the mouse, which is a bit like
mm-hmm,
drawing with a bar of soap. So
mm-hmm. So if someone, this idea of animation is kind of thinking about this more, the art really has to come before the animation. So was that like the journey that you were on, like more with the artwork, and then that prompted you to get more into that? Is that the right path?
yes, so from from the very beginning, it was first you draw the character, but then you're like, I want it to be alive. And one of the things about animation is seeing those drawings actually being alive is exciting. But I had no
Mm,
idea how to do that, and
mm-hmm.
yeah, try to figure it out and learn things. And yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because one of the things I like with Disney, like Disney Plus right now, the app is the behind the scenes. So the movies have the previs, which I think is like, man, that's the entire movie, where
Mm,
they've sketched the all of the frames out. It's so mind-boggling to me, just the time and the intensive nature that, goes into that. So such an amazing skill to have. So when you're putting something together with respect to a company or commercial or whatever it may be with the animation, what's the average time that it takes for creating these images to actually come alive?
So there are so many variables with that. So how long something is, the design of the characters. So really simple characters. Um, Obviously, if it's just two dots, a little shape and a mouth, that's a lot less work than a character with loads and loads of details all over their face. So those things are factors. Um, then what is it? Is it one character? Is it a crowd? Those kind of things vastly change. So it's really hard to even talk about the average time it takes because
Mm,
there is no average in a way, which
mm.
is one of the most annoying things when it comes to talking with clients because it's you're like, well, what are you actually looking for?
Yeah. Wow. How do you keep your creativity high? So, if you're doing a lot of desk work, computer work, things like that, what do you do to keep the creativity juices flowing?
I think the key thing with all creativity, and that's not just within creative jobs, but across the whole of life, is increasing the number of creative inputs. So I
Mm,
think reading books, going out, walking in the park, seeing things, try to observe the world, see what people do, listening to music. So I think the more creative inputs you have,
mm,
and the more that they're not the same as everyone else's.
okay. Yeah.
So rummaging in a secondhand bookshop and finding an interesting old book, the chances are there aren't many people reading that book. And so you've got this creative input that no one else has got.
Yeah.
And where I think one of the things that has happened in recent years is people are going on social media
Hmm.
to find their creative inputs. And everyone's seeing the same creative inputs because it's the algorithm is serving up the same stuff.
Hmm.
And I think that makes us a lot thinner as a culture where going out and seeing real things and conversations with all sorts of different types of people,
Hmm.
people that are very different, that are working in all sorts of different jobs and
Yeah.
homeless people. It doesn't really matter, just people across the board, um, different inputs. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk about social media and just kind of you talking about social inputs and connectivity with people. I think it's called the Denmark Human Project, where, at some of their libraries, you can meet up with someone for 30 minutes and learn their life story, where
that's cool.
yeah, it allows people to have this connection because that's one of the biggest challenges with loneliness. We have all this technology and people have thousands of friends on TikTok and Instagram, and yeah, we live in a world that's really lonely. So I want to get your thoughts with social media, and I think this will lead us to your project as well. Uh, I've had a love-hate relationship with social media, John. At times, I could be described as the Facebook hypocrite because I'd be on Facebook, then I'd delete, then I'd come back, and I've actually looked at it, John. I was on Facebook for about 15 years. And when I
Wow.
started saying that out loud, I was like, that's a career. 15
Mm,
years is a career when you really start thinking about it from that perspective. And so in 2016, there was a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport that really had a
mm.
big impact upon me. He's written another book called Digital Minimalism, which is fantastic. And so I started experimenting, like, okay, deleting, then I got back on, but I was only in one group. I didn't have any friends. I'll fast forward to this year because I want to hear more of your story with this, but I'm just trying to set it up. So, I've deleted all my social media accounts, and somebody said, "Well, what's that going to do to your podcast?" Well, at this point in time, I don't really care, because the mental component of it is so it's just a challenging thing, and I know you know this, and so many other people do. You just mentioned the algorithms, where it's like people, we almost literally have to cater to the a machine, an AI, and and maybe you'll hit the sweet spot, right? Every once in a while. And so I found it so hard to get through that 30-day period when you delete, and they give you 30 days like Facebook and Instagram if you want to come back. And it was just like the hardest thing. So I'd make it 2 weeks or
Mm,
3 weeks and then I'd go back. And so I finally got through that whole process, but it was challenging, and it's so weird because it felt like, man, I'm really missing something. And I'd reinstall, and there's nothing new. And then it's just like this whole vicious cycle. What's your philosophy? I'm curious about your own personal philosophy about social media, interacting with it, and then that can lead into what this new project that I want you to share as well.
mm. So my philosophy is very, very, on a practical level, very incoherent because
Okay.
I'm I'm very human. I'm a contradiction. Um, so
Yeah.
that's definitely um I'm very, very skeptical of it all. I used to be much more into it, and I've seen it get worse.
Yeah.
I think they've incentivized bad things and they've de-incentivized good things. So I remember the early days of Facebook was really exciting because you could create
Hmm.
events and then you could just go tick, 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 invite people to an event at an hour's notice and then go somewhere. And it was really fun. It'd get you out. And then they pushed all those tools to the background and then they made people so they're just addicted to the just
Yeah.
scrolling, looking at mindless stuff. So I've seen it change and I think it's had a negative effect on people. I've also seen myself, even from those early days, that I'd had notifications. This was on the computer before the phone because I didn't have a smartphone, but you'd see notifications come up on your computer. And I remember one night I'd been working till about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was sat there thinking, I've still got so much work to do, but what have I done today?
Yeah.
It's not like I've sat there and been lazy.
Yeah.
I've not done anything stupid with my time, and yet I'm not getting my work done. And then I decided to just Google those specific problems and actually found a website that was dealing with iTunes metadata as their main thing, which
Mm.
kind of sucked me in, but that's a whole other thing, iTunes metadata. But I started reading about this whole thing about turning off notifications. And I remember
Yeah.
that night I turned off all the notifications and I started reconfiguring my computer and then kind of went to bed at kind of 6 a.m. But then from that day on, it was much, much better. Just the simple thing of turning off notifications. And when I got a smartphone, I was like, no notifications, although they keep turning them back on again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and it's that in and though I've not read Deep Work, which you mentioned, I think I listened to the YouTube video by the guy that did the wrote the book, which is often the way with me. I've done the YouTube rather than the real thing.
Yeah.
And it's that realization that if I'm ever actually going to achieve anything in my life, I need to just put away the phone. I need to actually work for solid periods of time
Yeah.
on the task I'm doing. And that's really counterintuitive because I want to do this, I want to do that, but you've got to train yourself not to do that. So
Yeah.
I, I'm very inconsistent because although I do that, I can then spend ages scrolling and wasting my time. And I switch from my favorite social media. So I'm currently really into Substack, which I'm
Hmm.
justified to myself is not like the others. I don't think it is, but I just don't know whether I've just tricked myself. It does seem to be better. Um,
Yeah.
but then I'm using all these social media um, to promote my projects. So I'm getting um, where I didn't have Instagram or any of these things on my phone, I do at the moment because they only let you do things if you do it via the phone, which is kind of evil.
It
Um,
is. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too because just maybe a couple of days ago, it was almost like an urge. It was like an urge to, man, I could share some things on social media right now, but I don't have it. And but I
Hmm.
thought it was interesting when I felt that urge. And so one of the things that I did when I first deleted Facebook for good a couple of months ago, I just got a little notebook and I've been writing out. I think I'm up to like 52 things right now of what have I done since I've been off of social media? So, keeping track. And so going back and looking at that, that's actually has helped me out because we've talked about or, the art of connection and loneliness. And before the recording for this one, the other one wasn't working too well, but you brought up Genesis chapter 2. It's not good for man to be alone. And it is an epidemic, to a very large degree of the data and things like that. So yeah, so I'm still in that process of no, I don't have it, and I took this extreme measure, but I think there's some great benefit. So you have a new project,
Hmm.
Jazz Cow, and that I believe is on Kickstarter. Tell us what exactly is that, and how does it connect to this theme of well-being?
So, Jazz Cow is a animated sitcom, and it's about a cow that plays jazz, and he's leading a resistance movement with his random bunch of friends to the world of algorithms. So that's where it comes in because you've got the world that's encroaching on his world, and it's very atomized. You've got everybody into their tech, and everyone's very, very individualized. And then you've got Jazz Cow and his friends, and they're free, and they don't use any tech. They're like proper Luddites. So where I'm kind of contradictory, they're a little bit more hard line, and they don't use any tech at all. Um, they'll and so that's that's their setup. And one of the things I want to do is set various things opposite one another, but one of them is the idea of community against um, the individualism, because I think
Mm,
the way out of this mess is actually going to be community. I think physically going and meeting people face to face, physically going and doing stuff. I mean,
yeah.
these are still all downstream, probably from wider philosophical stuff, because I mean, I've been reading a book by Carl Truman about the making of the self and how
Mm,
we ended up turning in on ourselves to find our
mm,
identity, where we used to get that out of community.
mhm,
And that happened before the internet. But
mm,
the internet has just put rocket launchers on that. And I
mhm,
think the idea of music as well, because the thing about music is it's got this magical quality where when people start playing together, they have to start listening to one another. There's a
mhm,
level of interaction that isn't just conversation. And I think there's something really powerful about that shared experience. And particularly when you go and see live music, this it's I was hearing a band a while back and I was very impressed. Nobody bought a smartphone out at all, not a phone out at all.
mm.
Everybody was just transfixed on the music, and the whole place was electric.
Yep.
And it and what hundreds of people in a room, all with the same experience and the emotions going up and down. You get that with sport. So
Yep.
you saw when England lost, as they always do.
I'm sorry.
The I went
US
to a
lost
pub.
too, as we always do as well. Yeah.
You win the World Series though,
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we got the
because
World
you're the only
Series.
one in.
Yeah, that's right.
I was in a pub and the atmosphere would just grow as like as we saw score a goal, everything rose.
Yeah.
And then when we lost a goal, everybody just went, it was,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So there's that visceral experience of a group of people, and you can't get that if you sat at a computer on your own.
Yep, you can't do it. That's exactly right. So who is this animation going to be for? Is it for young people? Is it for adults? Is it going to be for schools? Who are you trying to target?
So this is where we're in this complicated position because we we want to be the adult sick animated sitcom, a little bit like where The Simpsons have been in the market. But as time has gone on since The Simpsons, which was 1989, um, animations aimed at adults have become cruder and
Yeah.
a lot more cynical and nihilistic. And we're not cynical or nihilistic. And so we're much more in that earlier mold, which seems like a strange place now in the market. But
Hmm.
I still believe that there are people that fit into that. So it'd probably be younger adults, but it would
Yeah.
be something that if a child was watching, no one would be worried that they're watching it. They would be,
Good. Yeah.
they just wouldn't get all the jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's something I can definitely share and watch and things like that for sure.
Thank you.
So, what else do people need to be thinking about when it comes to this topic of well-being? We know that electronics play a role, the internet, social media, our cell phones. I read a stat or heard a stat on a podcast saying that the average person will spend 20 years on their cell phone, which is astronomical. It's
It's
unbelievable.
frightening.
It is terribly frightening. What else comes to mind for you, or what do you think about, or what are you doing with respect to this idea of well-being?
So, and just to add to the previous thing, I think everyone should look at Jonathan Haidt's work.
Hmm.
He's a social psychologist who's done a lot of work on this particular topic, and it's yeah, he's got the raw numbers. Um, but in terms of the other stuff, I think we've got to go through the pain barrier. I think
Mm.
when you're with real people, they're annoying,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to go through that. And I think so many people's marriages break down, they have bad relationships with their kids, they've got all these, they don't have friends. And the reason these things happen, partly, is that people won't go through the pain barrier and just put up with the fact that other people are always annoying because we are always annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're annoying and other people are annoying, and you get enough people together that are all annoying,
All
then you're
right.
going to have problems. And a lot of people are so risk averse and they don't want to have
Yeah.
any conflict in their lives. And it's the same with politics, that
Yep.
someone with this politics doesn't want to speak to someone with that politics. And it's like you're sharing the same planet. Like you've got to go through the pain barrier and you can agree to disagree. That's fine. But I
Mm-hmm.
think we've we've become more fragile uh, to criticism, more fragile to things that are annoying. And I think we need to encourage one another to push through the pain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great observation. And I know you're a man of faith, and we had talked about that via email or through our connection. And when you think about the Lord's church, you definitely see that. Philippians has been on my mind. So you had two sisters, Eudia and Syntyche, and Paul is urging them to work together and to be in harmony. Or the widows that were neglected in the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 6. And so God has designed the church as a plurality of Christians, of disciples, and a lot of different backgrounds, right? And
Mm.
and problems. That's one of the identifying characteristics of the Lord's church. There's going to be problems, internal, external. Yet, with all that said, what you're saying, no, you still got to go through the pain, and there's something bigger, obviously, for the church, but there's something. I really like that idea of you have to be comfortable with maybe being uncomfortable. You can unfriend someone on social media, and what does that mean, right? Or block them and things like that. So that's a great observation. Yeah.
And I think it also molds us because when I do something dumb and annoy everybody, then and they all tell me that they're annoyed with me, that should then force me to change
Mm-hmm.
or at least encourage me in that direction.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and it's positive peer pressure. We all need it at some point in time, and that's how God has designed us, right? To have this interaction. And the fact that more platforms, technology, and yet there's still more challenges, that's got to force us to um realize there's got to be a better way. How has your faith then impacted your career with art, with animation, and even with Jazz Cow?
So I think one of the things that we resolved to do early in our company was to treat people well. So we saw that you often get freelancers, you get particularly actors, because actors are always desperate for work. People would often treat actors quite badly.
Hmm.
People would look for opportunities to exploit. So we said that we were always going to try and pay people fairly and try
Mm.
to do things in an honest way and then pay ourselves last. And that's hard to do.
That is hard to do, I bet.
And but we resolved to do that from day one because we thought we can't be Christian in our words and then do not be Christian in our actions. And often people look at the message in people's work, but actually who they are is more important because you can be a clanging gong
Mm,
and
yeah,
you're
First
not
Corinthians
actually.
13.
Yeah, so we just didn't want to be that, and we'd seen Christians do that badly as well, and just didn't and be the recipients of that
Yeah,
bad treatment. So we didn't want to be part of that cycle. Um, there's over the years there's been jobs that we've turned down. So I remember turning down a video promoting gambling.
mm,
Um, turned down. There was a guy that was an agent that was going to work with us, and I was quite excited. We were like, "Yes, we're going. This guy's going to get us loads of work. This is going to be great." The first job he gave us was a hip hop video, and I was like, "Okay, okay, cool. Listen to the song, yeah, cool." And then they send what they want in the video, and it's going to be all these like bikini girls, and I was like, "Ah, no, let's not do that."
yeah,
And so there's been a number of those types of things over the years that we've just
yeah,
said no to. Um, and that can be a real kick in the teeth. But actually, you look back and you're like, I'm so glad they didn't do that. It would
right,
have just destroyed me, and yeah, it wouldn't have been good.
yeah,
Um, but there's also a positive thing that you've got people around you that pray for you and care for you, so you're not on your own.
right,
And I think you can go crazy if you're very much on your own and you're struggling in a business very hard to make profit in. The margins are always low in our industry, so
right,
it's yeah, it's good to have good people around you. Um, yeah, and then so, I mean, some of our work has been explicitly Christian, but most of it isn't. And I think the stories we tell, we aim for truth. And not I don't mean truth in the we are going to tell you something true, but something that's true to human nature, true to the way that humans actually are.
mm-hmm,
Um, I remember seeing a debate recently about conservative or liberal storytelling, and I'm thinking, I don't care for any of that. I just want to tell the truth as I see
yeah,
it, and I
yeah,
want my observation to be as correct as it can be.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I appreciate that so much. What's the name of the company, if I can ask?
yeah, quirky motion.
Quirky Motion. Okay, that's it. Okay, gotcha. So are you guys working with or accepting projects all around the world, or is it just a particular location or
So we do accept projects all around the world. The only places that we've done work for has been the UK. I did some illustrations for people in Scandinavia during lockdown, and we've done one, two, three, three jobs for
nice?
people in the States. So
Nice. Yeah. You mentioned stories. What makes a good story? Storytelling is kind of like a big brand today, right? There's different books out there with storytelling. We know that stories are, I like to say, sticky, they stick. And
mm,
um what makes a good story?
I think so. The first thing that makes a good story is that it actually is a story.
Okay.
So one of the myths and you'll see lots of business people talk about storytelling,
Yeah.
and they're not actually telling a story. They're just it's a bit fake. So there has to be some kind of conflict. And I think some businesses are nervous of conflict because they're like, but we don't want to be associated with conflict. It's like there is no story without conflict, and actually it's the going through the conflict and coming out the other end is what makes it sticky. So the first thing I'd say, is it a story?
Mm-hmm.
But beyond beyond that, I think the thing that makes a good story is that you care for the main character
Mm,
and you want them to succeed, and that character is doing things that are true. And so if they are wanting to climb a mountain, the mountain is the challenge, but then maybe there's a tree in the way, there's a bench in the way. The person has to do what they would logically do, even if it starts making them do things that are absolutely crazy. It has to feel coherent.
mm,
Um, so yeah, that would be the core thing. And then I think the richer, the more interesting characters are, the relationships between characters, the grayer things are, because no, there's no one walking around like Superman, like who only ever does good. We're all this mixture. And that's interesting because it's the contradictions where you see things and the expectations where you say, oh, that's that type of person. And they act in a way that doesn't fit the stereotype. That forces us to think, and that's exciting. It wakes us up. It's good for us.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Earlier when we were trying to record, I believe you said you read comic books. Did I catch that correctly? Or
I'm
did I
not
miss
really,
that?
yeah, I think I'm not really into comic books. I did write
Okay.
some illustrated books during lockdown for
Yes.
kids with a friend, and they were actually in Somali and Finnish and Somali and Swedish,
Wow.
and they were to help Somali families learn the languages.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Very
so very
nice.
basic books like table, chair, book, or
I got you.
whatever. So,
Yeah, okay, I got you. So, I love books. What book recommendations do you have, or can you share? Maybe it's a book that you gifted, maybe it's a book, it doesn't matter genre, a book that's had a big impact on your life, or maybe it's a book that you go back to from time to
mm,
time. I know the number one book for you is the Bible, which I
yes.
love for sure. And talking about stories, you have so many stories and Samuel and Kings and Chronicles, the Gospels and the parables of Jesus, right? And so
Mm,
obviously he's the master storyteller. What other books come to your mind?
mm. So many. Yeah, I love books too, and um, probably in terms of fiction, the two come to mind. First is Brothers Karamazov,
Hmm.
or maybe The Idiot, actually, The Idiot by Dostoevsky. It's a little bit more accessible, and um, they're very interesting, these Dostoevsky books, because they are actually very, very Christian, very dark,
Hmm.
and there are all these kind of types of Christs in them. So in the idiot character, or the character
Hmm.
that's seen as an idiot, is a kind of type of Christ, and it's it's just incredibly um, deep psychological storytelling. Um, so there's that on one side, and then there's a book called 100 Years of Solitude, which is a
Hmm.
Colombian book, and they're doing a Netflix series of it, but that was due 5 years ago, and they're still not done it, and I don't know what's happening. Um,
Say the name again. 100 years of what?
Solitude,
Oh, okay.
and it's just so creative, and you've got these characters that are um well, kind of miraculous things just happen within their world, but it's very matter of fact, and it's it's kind of a strange book, but it's very creative and very, very interesting.
Hmm.
So they're two novels I'd go to. Um, I've been thinking a lot about the Arabian Nights actually,
Hmm.
uh, recently. It keeps I reread and listened to an audiobook of them, and it was when I found out that um, Aladdin is Chinese that
Hmm.
kind of blew my mind because I was like, wait a second, and then yeah, I was asking all sorts of questions about it, and it's they're quite yeah they're the stories are really quite odd in lots of ways, and Aladdin's actually quite racist and. There's all sorts of things that are being cleaned up in the versions that we've maybe more accustomed to, but
Yeah.
there's something really interesting about that set of those set of stories.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and then I'm just trying to think of some non-fiction things. Um, this there's yeah, I'm enjoying this Carl Trueman book at the moment, so that's just on my
Hmm.
in my head called
Yeah.
The Making of the Modern Self, I think.
Okay.
And it's talking about how we got to where we are as a society at the moment with a lot of our craziness. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. I was
no, no
listening to
problem.
you on a another podcast, and you had mentioned C.S. Lewis and the abolition of man.
Ah, yes,
Do you have any favorites? Is that one of your favorites from C.S. Lewis?
yes.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to read that book. It's short. You so you need it's short, but it's dense. You need to read it about 3 times to get it, unless you're really, really clever, which I'm not. It's deceptively short. Um, but brilliant. He's really nailed our society. He does it in his sci-fi novels in a novel
Yeah.
as a novel form. Then I'm going to get crucified by a lot of Lewis fans for saying this, but I think the novels need a bit more work.
Hey, he said it, not me, all right?
But the abolition of man, it really does nail it. George Orwell was on my side.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love your boldness. That's great. You gotta have a strong opinion, man. You gotta have a strong opinion and stick to it. That's right.
But Narnia books, his other great, they're great.
Yeah, yeah.
They are really good, the sci-fi novels, but they need a bit
Yeah.
more work.
I found a journal or like I guess it's like a journal. It's like 360 like something every day at a garage sale a number of years ago, and it's really good. And we've done some book clubs with some members of the church here, and you're right. It's funny because they started another one. I'm not part of it right now, but they're like, no, we need to read that chapter a couple of times. And I
Mm.
don't know if they may be, I don't know if they're reading, I don't think they're reading, maybe it's Mere Christianity or one of the other ones, but he's got some really great work, and he really makes you think for sure.
Yeah, Mere Christianity is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Such a he's it's so and that's actually much more readable, but it's so persuasive. I mean, I
Hmm.
can't really find much flaw in his core argument.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well,
Another really thin book that
yeah.
I've I haven't even finished. It's such hard work, but it's really thin. It's by a guy called Michael Polanyi, who is a scientist turned philosopher who was a Christian, who's talking about how we know what we know. And yeah, if someone really wants a brain stretcher that's hard work, that's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Those are great books, and you can put them in the show notes. I love to read, and there's just so many different things. We're reading right now with our son, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teens,
Mm,
and that's by Sean Covey. His father wrote Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and those principles you do see in the Bible as well. I think all good principles you see them in the scriptures too. But it's been a great book, and we'll read like 10 pages a night and or a day, and then talk about it and things like that. But it's been really good, and
mm.
really helping him out. But it's great for adults. It's it's for teenagers, but some of the things in there we don't always pick up, as adults for sure. So, well, how can people help support you? How can people help the company and Jazz Cow? Give us some details about where people can go and how we can help spread the word.
Yeah, so for Jazz Cow, if people go to jazzcow.co.uk, jazzcow.co.uk, and there's a link to the Kickstarter that you can sign up to get notified on the launch. You can sign up for the newsletter there, and you can read more about that. And for our company, it's quirkymotion.com. And if you like, you could commission us to do something. But
Yeah,
yeah, certainly the Kickstarter, that's very easy to jump on board with when we start. Um,
awesome. Yeah, awesome. John, it's been great talking to you, and I hope nothing but the best for you and the company. And thanks so much. I know it's super late there, but thank you so much for your time.
it's not too bad. It's not too late. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care. God bless.
Thanks.